Hi, thank you for watching a very, very special recording of Agenda Awani on the sideline of World Islamic Economic Forum. The 11th one, it has come back to Malaysia. I'm right here, right now, at KLCC Convention Center, where a lot of discussions has been held, and I must thank the organizers of WIEF because they have allowed me to sit down for Agenda Awani with a lot of great leaders and speakers here. And in this at this present moment, I have two that have picked out to speak with you, our brothers and friends from South Africa. And Ibrahim Patel, closest to me, he's the numero uno of the leader of the Young Leaders Network of WIEF. He's been on Agenda Awani a few times, but I would like to introduce a new friend of mine, Mr. Desmond Golding. He's a very important leader from the ATI, or that's the funky name for Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs, Department of the Province of KwaZulu-Natal. And KwaZulu-Natal, for you guys who remember Mandela dearly, was the province, according to my friend here, where Nelson Mandela was arrested to start his jail term. So there's a lot of economic history, but we will go there later. What I want to link with our South African friends would be first and foremost, because this time WIF looked at building resiliency for equitable growth. And in this country, especially after the ratification of Sustainable Development Goals recently in New York, we've been talking about equitable growth, we've talking about inclusivity, sustainability. Few weeks ago, when we looked and heard the presentation of 2016 budget and the 11th Malaysia Plan, it was very integral to look at those components too. So maybe I want to pose this question about South Africa here. And of course, Ibrahim can always link it back to the Muslim economic network. Equitable growth is a motivation and a target for many countries around the world, if not all. However, the advantage of being at World Islamic Economic Forum is to look at the layers where there are actionable items to be done. So if you can select those that you think are most crucial based on the experience of South Africa, because just like Malaysia, there's a clear gap and there's a clear inequitable distribution of wealth in both our societies. So maybe there are things for us to exchange notes with. Maybe Ibrahim can start because you're quite a veteran of this show, and then we go to my friend from KwaZulu-Natal.
Thanks for having me on your show once again, and it's great to be here with WIEF and with Astro. Sure. Your question on resilience, and must remember that we are facing economic challenges across the globe, not one particular country, but all countries are facing economic challenges. And it's how we position ourselves within those challenges that will determine the outcome on the other side. In terms of a South African perspective, so let me start with your question about a South African perspective. South Africa has a very high Gini coefficient at the moment, which is a high inequality in society. And it's a concern to both private sector and to government and to civil society that we have a high inequality in our society. There are a number of measures that have been put into place to understand and to address those inequalities. And a great deal of emphasis has been put into inclusive growth. How do we include all sectors of society in all of the endeavors that have been put into place and all the policies and programs that have been put in place so that all parts of society grow, not just one segment of society. So it's a huge concern. Part of the agenda is on the youth, and that's where my particular passion is that how do we grow the youth? Because most countries have, in Africa, have a youthful population. You know, in the Muslim world, there's a significant youth population as well. So how do we engage and how do we encourage the youth and how do we stimulate growth amongst the youth, especially in entrepreneurship? Because it's seen, you know, if we look at the economy at the moment, with the fragmentation that's taking place, which is driven by technology, a number of the big companies are going to start falling apart. And this creates opportunity for smaller entrepreneurs. We need to position society, we need to position the youth within that opportunity. So a number of policies that have been put into place, a number of programs have been put into place from a South African intervention perspective on how we can grow inclusively all sectors of society.
We come from a province called KwaZulu-Natal, which is a state, the second biggest economy in the country, the state that is fondly known for its solid leaders that have come from the province of KwaZulu-Natal. You talk about the first president of the ruling party, John Langalibalele Dube, who was the first president of the ANC, comes from that part of the world. You talk about Mahatma Gandhi, one of the greatest world leaders who, in fact, used to be a resident of the province, stayed in the province. You talk about the current president of the republic, which comes, from that particular province. You also, when you refer to KwaZulu-Natal, you also refer it to what is called the Zulu Kingdom. Okay. As you know very well, King Shaka Zulu, come from that particular province, who was also one of the greatest military strategists, who changed the course of how warfares were fought, throughout the whole world by his the Buffalo Horn strategy. Yeah. So you talk about a province that is a trendsetter when it comes to the economic direction, the social direction, as well as the political direction in the country. And it's quite important as well that us being part of this particular conference here today, the ideals that all these particular leaders that I've mentioned are neatly resonant to the theme of the conference today, that is building equality, that is fostering equality, making sure that there's equitable distribution and enjoyment of resources. That is the ideal that they strive for. You mentioned the issue of young people. Young people, as you would know very well, they are the future, It doesn't mean that you need to only engage them tomorrow. You need to engage them today, and naturally young people, as one of the leaders, in fact, once observed, Lenin, he said the young people are a vanguard of any revolution, which means that you need to be able to occupy them. They need to be able to be occupied either through education or inclusivity in the economy. And you talk about the world that is changing. It's true. The 21st century is a knowledge-based economy. Yeah? Yes. And I think the advent of the internet has made it very possible that somebody from Malaysia could communicate with somebody from Mali. Somebody who is, in fact, in Australia could be able to communicate with somebody in Austria. From Cape Town to Cairo. The ability to communicate is just a click of a button. So the development of these social movements throughout the whole world, it's in fact indicative of the nature of the society we live in. Do we think that we should be able to be responsive? Yes, of course, but also as we respond to the challenges that are faced by young people, so we should also equally respond to the challenges faced by women, minority communities, but also those that have been excluded from the economy. Like in South Africa, blacks, broadly speaking, which actually have been victims of apartheid. But in dealing with that, you need always to take a long-term horizon. By profession, I'm an ex-investment banker. I've always realized that in any engagement that you have, you must avoid what is called the boom and bust effect. Immediately when you go in and you introduce huge changes, I can tell you, I can bet my last rand, sooner or later it will be short-lived and it actually collapse.
All right. From South Africa today, I want to draw the parallel between policies. And we have the new economic policy. You have the BEE, the Black Empowerment Engagement kind of policy in that sense. But the strategy is the same. There's great, huge disparity. And the policy is supposed to solve that by making many things a reality. However, because I just came back from New York and the SDGs discussions, one of the failure of the MDG before, Millennium Development Goal, was the execution at the ground, local level. Local government, local authorities. So that's why I like the fact that I have the province of KwaZulu-Natal with such a great history of leaders. So how do you take that challenge now at the ground level? Because it's easy to say that, yes, our policy will empower the black to have, let's say, 70% of education enrollment reflecting the composition of society. But that's easier said than done. Because if you ask a black youth to go to a university, then what about the impact to the family now? Because he would not be a breadwinner. Then he will have to sacrifice that few years for the family. So we in Malaysia have that kind of issue before. It's getting less and less, but we still have it. So if I draw that parallel to you, at KwaZulu-Natal's level, how do you work the BEE?
You know, Malaysia and South Africa, which includes KwaZulu-Natal, one most incredible thing is that there's been a lot of cross-learning between the two countries. If you look at the new development plan that the government has introduced, it is the same plan that Malaysia introduced when it was dealing with issues of legacy, you know, of an unjust historical past. That particular plan is a plan that is anchored on long-term strategic goals. But it's also a plan that is informed by many policy initiatives that I will mention very briefly, which among them includes an equitable society where there's less unemployment and where there's less poverty as well. So BEE is one of those, or black economic empowerment, is one of the transformative tools that are there to be able to deal and ameliorate the past injustices by integrating those that were excluded in the mainstream economy into the bigger economy. How do we do that? BEE is a same concept like affirmative action that Malaysia introduced. So whilst affirmative action looks at an individual's ability to be employed, BEE looks at a corporate level, that is those that have been historically excluded are able to be participant in the economy. So how does that happen? Companies, domestic companies, even international companies are encouraged to be able to have partners which are black. By black in South Africa, we mean African, South African of Indian origin, as well as people of mixed race, that they are able to participate in the economy in a very meaningful way. So even as a province, we encourage, we monitor that companies are able to be reflective of the demographics of the country, you know. So it's a policy that is a conscious policy by government. It's a policy that, as a province as well, we implement. Of course, it's not robbing Peter to pay Paul, but we encourage that it is in the best interest of every business that it reflects the demographics.
How successful has it been in KwaZulu-Natal?
No, I think, you know, if there was no black economic empowerment or affirmative action, the country would have been different. The country would have been still locked in the legacy of the past, you know. As we indicated earlier on, it's not a boom and bust kind of an approach, but I think the results are there, the results are remarkable. Today, you've got many blacks which are business owners, blacks which are professionals, blacks which occupy high positions, but of course, it's not enough, and it takes a long time. Even today, when you look at Malaysia, the affirmative action is still relevant because it takes long to deal with these particular issues, you know. And we also learn from Malaysia as well with the big fast results, you know, which is the Bermuda concept. We have introduced it, in fact, into our ocean economy. So also what we are doing there is that is also an economy that remains highly untransformed in the country. So we would want that economy to be transformed, unlock the value, and make sure that black businesses are able to play a critical role in that economy.
Ibrahim, this is where I know you want to come in, but I just have to engineer a bit of a slight tangent here. What I like about being at WIEF for a few editions already is that you can take that macro of a perspective and you can nail it down right to a micro young social entrepreneur, for example. So I would like to take your wisdom as the Young Leaders Network Big Chief here. To a young entrepreneur right now, Gen Y, that might not even matter. Because if I'm an entrepreneur already, I am not even looking at positive affirmation. Because here I am, if I come to KL for WIEF, oh, this guy, he's mapping stem cell to mobile phone application in the US, and I want to link to him. So How do you marry all this, especially at a platform which has such creative energy and alternative at that to the mainstream of World Economic Forum, Davos and such, like what you have, to bridge and make sense of the problem there?
Okay. So interesting, because you're now linking South Africa to WIEF, and I see the point that you're making. So if I take what the HOD has said, is in South Africa you raised the issue of BE, but it's not just BEE any longer. Okay. It's now triple BEE, okay, which is broad-based black economic empowerment. Okay. And the broad-based part of it is what it has evolved into is how do we translate across the spectrum. So it's not just about employment, it's not just about management, but it's also about access to finance, which is where the young player would be interested in. It's about access to networks, and it's about access to markets as well. So the young person who finds the idea is not interested particularly in the affirmative action part of it, but he's more interested in how he would be assisted in those opportunities. And so this is where it gets translated into it. The second part that you raised, which is about in terms of the strategy, and there's a lot of comparison between Malaysia and South Africa, but you know that the Millennium Development Goal has been just chucked away. It's now been, it's been replaced with sustainable development, and within that, the policy that the HOD talks about and the Department of Economic Development has been very visionary in its outlook for the province and for the state. And not only has it looked at, and I'm dwelling a little on the policy part of it because it translates back into the action. The policy part of it has been that its vision for economic growth includes all sectors of society. So not only is it looking at the urban sector of society, but it's looking at how it translates industrial hubs in rural areas. So you don't have people moving out of rural areas just to access employment. So the creation of specialized industrial hubs in rural areas. So we have, for instance, in South Africa, rather than just having one economic hub, we have different economic hubs spread across the entire province, which are specialized nodes. So you have a clothing and textile industrial hub in one part of this province, a food and agro-processing in another part of the province, an automotive hub in a different part. So it creates specialization, but it creates employment across the entire province. Otherwise, what was happening in terms of legacy was we had just a particular region of the state, which is the main city, was getting all the economic activity. The rural areas, 200 or 300 kilometers outside of the main city, were being affected by poverty. Now, within that comes the opportunity for the young entrepreneur who says, where there's an employment or where there's an industrial hub that has been established, how can he position himself within that? He doesn't have to wait for the BE part of it. He's waiting for the support of government, and government is prepared to support any young person across all race groups, because once again we're going back to the social cohesion, because the National Development Plan, one of the goals of the National Development Plan, which is the new plan, is about social cohesion as well. So we have established what we call the social compact. It's the first time that we've actually seen this, where business, government, labor and civil society sit together on a council to determine the economic policy for the province. Otherwise, normally what you see is government decides a particular policy and then tries to have everyone implement it. Here you have all parts of society working together for the economic policy.
You are still watching a very, very special recording of Agenda Awani at the 11th WIEF, and I'm focusing on South Africa. I only have a few minutes left. KwaZulu-Natal, go and Google it up. Very important and strategic for South Africa. I'm just going to go straight to Des, who was an investment banker, now leading at T, the Department for Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs. If I take a micro approach to Halal Hub, for example, Malaysia has done it, and Malaysia is leading it. If you look at the Thomson Reuters research presented here at WIEF 11, but how best would you want to do it? Because if I play the devil's advocate, it's a very small number compared to your entire population of Muslim consumers. But how would you want to work with the halal operators here? Would it be a transit point for South Africa to move into other areas in Africa? What kind of capacity are you strategically looking at?
I can tell you three things. The first one is that there is a sizable Muslim community in the country, you know, so the production will be, in fact, for the Muslim community.
Number 1 to 2 million around?
Yeah, 2 million.
2 million.
Number two, many people in South Africa, like many people all over the world, they have become very health conscious. They are very careful of what they eat. So halal food is not only consumed by Muslim in the country, you know. So the third one is, of course, production for export. And as you know, South Africa is a gateway to the African continent. So it will also be production to the African continent. And also South Africa is part of the BRICS economy. It will be part of that particular BRICS offshoot, as well as South Africa plays a critical role in the world trade. So it will also be for that particular market as well.
Since Ibrahim has been identified by WF as one of the young leaders of the world, if obviously for South Africa he's one of the best one. So can you coin for us, by closing this discussion, onto this point that I'm going to throw to you, which is new kind of opportunities, new kind of field, blue ocean or otherwise, need new kind of leaders. So for the young people out there that might still be hesitant, I've never been to South Africa, but I'm very interested to go and network. How would you pitch it to them using the network that you have seen, empowered by the Young Leaders Network of WEF, for example? Just come and do it, because we know that there are opportunities. It's just streamlining it and putting it into a scalable exercise and options, for example.
Well, as the HOD put it, we are open for business. So that would be the first key message. The second key message is, if you don't jump into the ocean, you'll never be able to swim.
But that's frightening.
It's not. We have the biggest shark net protected coastline in the world.
That's why.
We have 45 kilometers of shark nets along the 640 kilometers of coastline. It's the best surfing area. You can enjoy yourself.
So how do they start? Contact the Young Leaders Network?
Well, they can contact Young Leaders Network, or they can contact the Department of Economic Development. They can even Google, as you pointed out. These are tech-savvy people. They'll find their way to us.
I'm just trying to throw to them the positive side of, hey, these are people waiting for someone like you to come.
Of course,
that kind of mood.
Of course we are. And the reason, the HOD talked about the Halal Hub. We're here to collaborate with the Malaysians on the best practices that they have in the Halal Hub. And not only is it particular to the 2 million Muslims in South Africa, but it's the 140 million Muslims across the whole of Africa. That is the target market. So if someone's interested in a target market of 140 million Muslims, which we are the key entry point to, because KwaZulu-Natal is known as the gateway to the whole of Africa. It's the biggest and busiest harbour in the whole of Africa is the Port of Durban. 60% of all containerized goods entering sub-Saharan Africa come through the Port of Durban. So where would you want to be?
And what about the tech-savvy guys who wants to look at the technology side of business?
We have high tech in South Africa. We have 4G networks are all over the place. We've got fiber capabilities. We have ICT capabilities. And more than that, ICT is seen as a strategic industry by government itself. So a lot of money has been put into developing the backbone and infrastructure.
That's because you carry the clarion call of one of the most, for myself individually, respected parties in the world for me, which is the ANC. Also, I will give you the last word in this discussion, especially in terms of what was the best takeaway for you from Malaysia and from the 11th WIEF?
You know, from Malaysia, my takeaway is that you see a lot of practical implementation of issues. You know, that for me is a takeaway. From the forum or from the conference itself, is that it has been able to open one's eyes that there is a huge market of Islamic financing that is there, that in fact is not only safe, that hasn't been scathed by the global economic meltdown because of its advantages, you know, the lack of interest payment, and also the fact that it is not over leverage as opposed to conventional banking. So for me, it's a simple message, as we said with my colleague, KwaZulu-Natal, we are open for business.
Thank you so much, Des. Thank you so much, Ibrahim. As usual, always a pleasure. The proof is always in the pudding, and we'll see this if we see Des and Ibrahim having the ability to, persuade that there must be daily direct flights from KLIA to, South Africa, at least by 5 international airlines. Before that happened, put your superhighway connectivity on broadband, and I'm sure we can network with them. Thank you so much to the South African friends. Thanks to you for watching. Thanks to the organizers of WIEF, the 11th one, for allowing great discussions like this to take place here. I'll see you in another episode of Agenda Awani very, very soon. Goodbye. Thank you so much.
Okay.